Link is a hoarder. The guy has bottomless pockets full of a bunch of random junk, much of which provides no practicality in actually completing his main quest of saving the princess. And in this video, I'm going to fuel his greedy collection-centric addiction by continuing my mission to 100% complete every single mainline 2D Zelda game in only 14 days, including the OG Zelda releases on the NES, all the way up to the newest releases on the Nintendo Switch. With 10 games to complete, brutal RNG, soul-crushing difficulty, and hundreds of hours of gameplay to endure, this is one crazy challenge. This video is part 2 of the 14-day challenge, so make sure to watch part 1 if you have not seen that already. The link for that video is in the description. In part 1, we completed Zelda 1, Zelda 2, A Link to the Past, and Link's Awakening. In part 2, we continue our journey in the middle of day 3 of this gauntlet with the pair of games that made me the most nervous going into this challenge, considering the sheer amount of content I need to play through. These games are The Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Seasons, and Oracle of Ages. So what makes the previous 4 Zelda games I've completed pale in comparison to these 2 Game Boy Color games? Well, that has to do with how these games are structured. The process to 100% complete these 2 games is the most complicated out of any Zelda game to exist thus far, and I'll do my best to explain it as clearly as I can. Oracle of Seasons and Ages were released on the same day, and a main feature of these games is a password system that allows you to link one game with the other. For instance, if you play Oracle of Seasons first and beat it, you'll get a password that you can type in before your playthrough of Oracle of Ages. And that password will create story alterations that make your playthrough of Oracle of Ages seem like the conclusion of these 2 games. Linking the 2 games allows for the player to experience the true ending for these games, so we'll need to link the 2 games in order to obtain 100% completion. Also, it doesn't matter if you play Oracle of Seasons or Oracle of Ages first. Whichever game you play second will seem like the conclusion of the duology. To make things even more complicated though, once the player completes one of these games and completes the other one after playing through the true ending, they will unlock another password called the Hero's Secret that acts as sort of a New Game Plus and unlocks even more collectibles if you play through the 2 games over again, this time in the reverse order of which you originally played the 2. So 4 whole playthroughs are needed to 100% these 2 games. 2 playthroughs of Oracle of Seasons and 2 playthroughs of Oracle of Ages. The main reason for 4 playthroughs being required is to allow the player to obtain all 64 rings in a singular save file, where once a ring is obtained, it can be transferred to any of your 4 save files. I'll touch more on these rings later on in the video. For the order that I'll be playing the games for this challenge, I chose to play Ages, then Seasons again, and then finally Ages. I chose to play Ages first because there are some really useful rings only present in Oracle of Ages that I wanted to obtain my first playthrough, so that I could use them throughout my next 3 subsequent playthroughs. So we know I'll be playing through Oracle of Ages first, but what is required to 100% these games besides collecting all 64 rings that I mentioned earlier? Well, for each of my 4 playthroughs, I'll also be beating all dungeons and obtaining the dungeon map and compass for each of them, obtaining all exclusive items in their upgraded variants, such as the level 3 Mirror Shield, level 3 Master Sword, fully upgraded Seed Satchel and Bomb Bag, etc. And I'll get myself to the maximum health capacity in all 4 playthroughs. So with that background out of the way, let's jump right into our first playthrough of Oracle of Ages. Now, part of my reason for playing Oracle of Ages first is to obtain some really useful rings earlier on, but another reason is because this game is more challenging compared to Oracle of Seasons, so I wanted to get it over with as soon as possible. I'm a lot better at the straightforward combat and platforming sections of the combat-focused Seasons, and the more puzzle-focused Ages made me a bit nervous, because getting stuck on a tricky puzzle could lose me a lot of time. I also say that Oracle of Seasons and Ages are the first 2 games in this challenge that I had barely played before, so I had to more frequently consult a guide to know where certain collectibles were, and how to go about collecting them the fastest. Oracle of Ages started out simple enough though, in typical Zelda introductory fashion. I chauffeured around Impa who had a nasty case of Argyria, and witnessed our villain Varen wreak havoc in the past who negatively affect the present, where Link resides. And from here, our quest is kicked off. Stop Varen to save the land of Labrynna. So from here, I made my way to Vasu, the ring guy, and earned my first of many rings, the Friendship Ring, which does absolutely nothing. Good start. Link can only wear 1 ring at a time, and most rings have certain effects to benefit the player, but a lot of them also have no effects at all and just act as trophies for the player. So after being unimpressed by Vasu, I made my way to a guy named Bipin, and surprisingly enough, his wife let me, an unknown stranger who broke into their home, name their child. So I named him the most honorable name I could think of, Admiral McPoo. They only gave me 5 characters to work with in naming the kid. I had to work the best with what I had. I then got a shovel, obtained my first piece of heart, and planted my first of many Gasha seeds for these 2 games. For those that don't know, there are these soft soil patches scattered across the overworlds of Oracle of Ages and Seasons, where you can plant Gasha seeds, and after you kill a certain amount of enemies, the tree will grow enough to produce a Gasha nut. Inside the Gasha nut, you can find a collectible. These collectibles can range from rupees to healing potions, but the most abundant reward, and the one that I mainly planted Gasha seeds for, was rings. Out of the 64 unique rings that exist in these games, some are set rewards for completing certain minigames or opening certain chests, but there are a number of these rings that can only be found in these Gasha trees. I'll touch more on these Gasha trees later on in the video though. Next, I got flirted on by a talking tree, bought a shield for 30 rupees, and took out the first dungeon of the game without any real issues. Immediately after exiting the dungeon, I ran into Maple. In addition to planting Gasha seeds in soft soil spots, running into the witch Maple is also a way to get exclusive rings, where once you run into her, a number of your items and her items will fall to the ground, which results in a mad dash for you to pick up as many items as you possibly can. During this sequence, I found that Maple tends to firstly go for the most valuable items, so it can be difficult to grab her dropped rings in time. But because of the fact that you encounter Maple after killing 30 enemies, and therefore run into her rather frequently, Maple's ring drops were a big help in me being able to obtain all the rings in the game. I then obtained the Poe clock from a ghost to kick off the game's trading sequence, and then entered a forest to witness one of the worst songs in any Zelda game. Listen to this. Oracle of Seasons and Ages has some real bangers of songs, but there's a few of them that just sound so bad, especially in Oracle of Ages. There's something about the frequency of that song that just sounds so annoying, and it's so repetitive, and I had to listen to it for quite a while because in order to progress, you need to find all 3 stray fairies through trial and error. Yes, picking random paths until you stumble across them. And what's worse is that in order to find one of the fairies, you need to go up, down, and then up again from the starting area. As if that makes any logical sense. Once out of the forest, I obtained the Harp of Ages, which allows Link to travel between the past and present. Helped out a poor fellow who just finished his last roll of TP to progress the trading sequence, when he gave me, dear God, I don't even want to know what's in there. Found some mysterious seeds on a tree, and I somehow found myself being kidnapped and mugged by some guards when they took some of my mystery seeds. Except I wasn't really mugged because they gave me some bombs. So, thank you? I then made it to the second dungeon of the game, which was more annoying than anything. There were these block-pushing puzzles that reminded me a lot of that Block Wars game from Cool Math for Kids back in the day, where you had to push a cube until its correct colored face lands on a certain tile on the grounds. These puzzles were not super difficult, but they ate up some precious time trying to figure out. Also, the boss was super annoying as well. You're supposed to throw a bomb inside of it when its red face appears, but it can be pretty hard to time, especially when the speed ramps up the more you progress into the fight. I even straight up died during this fight, because if you're unlucky enough to land on his blue face, he launches a multitude of these fireballs that are extremely hard to dodge and deal a lot of damage when they run into you. But after another attempt and being more familiar with the fight, I was able to take this guy out. Also, Nintendo included a small troll during this boss fight that I thought was pretty funny. Whenever you damage him when you land on his red face, he drops a heart directly below him, but upon landing on his final red face right before he dies, he actually falls down, so if you're standing there expecting a heart, you could get killed right as the boss fight ends as you're expecting to obtain a heart. I then made my way to Pippin's house again to pay McPoo a visit. Over the course of the game, if you interact with him, he grows up and displays certain traits depending on how you interact with him. I went ahead and included allowing this kid to grow up in the list of items required for 100% completion, because interacting with him does have a notable effect in the game of developing his character. So after being asked to give some rupees to fund McPoo's hospital visit, I gave him a singular rupee. Hey, I didn't say I had to do a good job with seeing this kid to adulthood. Plus, I had more useful things to use my rupees on, like jewelry, that provides me no benefit besides growing my surplus collection of rings. Dang, this kid's doomed. So from here, I rode a flying hippo to get some flippers, pretended to be a kangaroo's child as I hopped around until obtaining a map from a 35-year-old man dressed as a fairy, and got lost at sea, and washed up on an island with lizard people, who stripped all of my items away from me. This area is definitely one of the highlights of this game. It's a precursor to Eventide Island from Breath of the Wild, and it was honestly pretty fun and challenging trying to get all of Link's items back. Eventually though, after getting all of my items back, I entered dungeon number 3, Moonlit Grotto. This dungeon was pretty challenging, but there's one room that honestly made me want to pull my hair out. You're supposed to take out 4 armor statues with bombs, but you only have 10 bombs at your disposal. You may think, oh, 10 bombs for only 4 enemies? That's no problem. Well, you're wrong. These armor statues are very unpredictable, where once you throw the bomb at one, they could be close to the other side of the room when your bomb actually explodes. So I would just throw one of my bombs down and pray that one of them would walk into the explosion by chance. Long story short, I ran out of bombs a lot in this room and had to reset a bunch. In one attempt, I managed to kill 3 of them and have 6 bombs remaining, but every single one of my 6 remaining bombs missed the last guy until I had to leave and re-enter the room again. Like, you can't even make this up. But eventually, I made it through the room, made it through some more tricky puzzles, until I made it to the boss fight, which I straight up died in. A common theme that I noticed about the boss fights in the 2 Oracle games is that they're incredibly unique. All of them have a cool design, including the mini-bosses, and each of them have a creative way to take them out. However, the solution to take them out can be cryptic at times, where it can take a while to get used to them, and some trial and error is required to figure out their weak points. With this Dungeon 3 boss, for instance, you're supposed to use your siege shooter to damage it after ricocheting your shot off the wall. It's not very intuitive, but I guess if you keep trying different attack methods over and over again, you'll eventually figure it out. And during my second attempt at the boss, I was more used to its attack patterns and knocked it out without a problem. From here, I progressed the trading sequence some more after obtaining the doggy mask and then the dumbbell, and braved the fairy woods yet again, where I found Moosh, who became my designated animal buddy for the game. One of the interesting features about Oracle of Seasons and Ages is that you're able to choose whichever one of the 3 animal buddies you can ride. There is Moosh, Ricky, or Dimitri. For Oracle of Ages, getting Ricky or Dimitri requires extra work that I don't have time for, so I just decided to go with Moosh. Also, it's not like it really matters which animal you choose. The animal you choose just has slight variations on how the overworld map looks in a few areas. Moosh is probably the dumbest looking out of the 3, so I wasn't exactly thrilled with getting Moosh, but it wasn't the end of the world because it was pretty rare that I even needed to ride the guy. Sorry, buddy. After progressing through the main quest some more, I obtained a much appreciated bomb bag upgrade from a fairy, where I was able to hold 30 bombs instead of the measly 10 that caused me so much trouble in the previous dungeon. Eventually, I made it to a pretty wild minigame that's required to beat in order to progress. There's this guy named Patch that has to repair your Tunai nut to let you progress to the next dungeon, but instead of simply being a good Samaritan and fixing it on the spot, he makes you participate in a quote, restoration ceremony, in his basement where he unleashes monsters upon you that you have to kill. Seems a bit unnecessary, but okay. This little game seems more in place in a Saw movie if I'm being honest. When you complete the ceremony, he has a Freudian slip and accidentally calls the ceremony a trap. And he does this twice. Yeah, this guy's a nut job. The next dungeon deemed Skull Dungeon went well enough, where I was able to get the dungeon map, compass, and kill the boss just fine. Once out of the dungeon, I ran into Maple and got extremely lucky, where she dropped a piece of heart for me to pick up, and the piece of heart landed right next to me for me to snatch up with ease. It's actually pretty rare for Maple to drop this piece of heart, and when she does drop it, she oftentimes sprints over to it right away to pick it up before Link, so it can be hard to grab. In order to 100% these games, I'll be getting every single heart container upgrade in all 4 of my playthroughs, so I'll be needing to get this Maple exclusive heart piece 3 more times. I then checked in on McPoo to see that he miraculously got better, purchased a level 2 ring box to allow Link to carry more rings at a time, and told a depressed kid a funny joke to progress the game's trading sequence. What's the joke, you may ask? Well, just see for yourself. Apparently Nintendo didn't want to think of an actual joke, so they just added playful music as Link danced around like a goofball. After doing a bit more progressing through the trading sequence, Azura gave me a broken sword which I had to bring to, you guessed it, our favorite psychopath Patch to fix up. In order to fix the broken sword, I had to play the same demented minigame I played earlier, except this time, it was a little bit more challenging. I did fail at one time though, where the cart managed to hit the broken sword before I killed all the enemies. It is funny though, that the game acts like it matters that the cart slammed into a sword that's already broken. Like I feel like if the cart slams into it, there is no real consequence if the sword is already broken. But that's besides the point. After successfully getting through Patch's minigame, he fixed the sword which resulted in me getting the level 2 sword, which deals more damage compared to the starting sword, and marked the end of this game's trading sequence. From here, I progressed through the main story by helping out some Gorons until I obtained the level 1 armor ring, which is honestly pretty useless. It increases your defense by a little bit, but it also decreases your attack power by the same amount, so it basically does nothing besides delaying combat by making yourself and enemies harder to kill. Before long though, I made it to the next dungeon, Crown Dungeon, which has, in my opinion, the worst sounding song in the entire Zelda franchise by far. Just listen to this. Just after the first few seconds of hearing that, I had the urge to turn it down. and it's honestly pretty baffling that people at Nintendo heard that music and thought it sounded okay. It's just so annoying, repetitive, and honestly spoiled the whole dungeon experience for me, where I just played through the entire dungeon on mute the whole time because it was just that bad. The actual gameplay of this dungeon went fine though, where the boss actually surprised me of how creative it was. The entire fight is a puzzle, where you use the Cane of Samaria to place blocks down to combine the boss so that you can attack it. This was so unique, where I honestly can't think of another Zelda boss fight that's just a puzzle at its core like this. Heck, this boss fight even has a reset button off to the side to reset a portion of the fight if you somehow mess it up enough to get soft locked. After exiting the dungeon, I did some more wandering around until I came across a Goron. I gave him 20 Ember Seeds and 20 bombs, and he agreed to give me some of his treasure after he finished digging. Before I took on this challenge, I came across a website that says he gives you the red luck ring if you come back to him after waiting enough time. But after checking in on him throughout my playthrough of Oracle of Ages, he would just be digging away still and not reveal any treasure. Eventually, I got the red luck ring from a minigame reward, so I didn't have to keep checking in on this guy, but let me know in the comments if you know the criteria for this guy to reveal his reward. I feel like the solution has to be some convoluted random order of tasks that the player has to perform or something, because after hours of playing, this guy wouldn't give me anything. Upon wandering around the overworld in the present, I came across an old man, who similar to the obnoxious guy from Zelda 1 on the NES, makes you pay him 100 rupees to repair his door. Also, what's even more hilarious is that if you visit the exact same guy in the past, he actually gives you 200 rupees this time around. I wonder what changed in the guy going from the past to the present, but it definitely was not for the better. At this point in the game, I was introduced to 3 minigames hosted by Gorons, that are required for me to participate in to beat the game. A game where you ride in a minecart and shoot at rupees with your seed shooter, a game that's basically baseball where you have to hit targets to earn points, and thirdly a game that's essentially a rhythm game where you repeat a certain rhythm that a Goron creates. All these minigames are required to play to get a key to the next dungeon. I started with the cart shooter game, which was the easiest out of the 3, but it wasn't exactly a walk in the park. You have to hit all 12 targets to win the grand prize, but after a few attempts of getting the hang of it, I knocked it out fine and was able to progress the story. After this, there was actually a harder variant of this game that I took on to try and win the boomerang, which is not required for the base game, where I obtained it for 100% completion's sake. What's tricky about the boomerang is that it's not a guaranteed grand prize for this minigame, so you could have to play this game 10 or 20 times before even being able to attempt winning the boomerang. After a few times of resetting the minigame grand prize, I got lucky and came across the boomerang. I had to lock in and hit all 12 targets to win, where failing now could cause me to cycle through the prize pool again for who knows how long. So I locked in and began the minigame. I played through the first room without any misses, and after playing through half of the second room, I had a few more targets to hit when... After missing the last target, I clutched it with the final shot to put an end to the minigame. I then knocked out the baseball game, which is probably the second hardest of the 3, but I was able to knock it out without much issue. If you hit the blue targets, you gain points, and if you hit the purple targets, you lose points. And you had to get a certain number of points within an allotted amount of swings to win the game. My only real gripe about this minigame is that it's super hard to time your sword swings to hit targets, because the speed at which the ball comes out is random, and pressing a button to swing your sword doesn't give you that much control over where the ball ends up. The final minigame, and the hardest in my opinion, goes to the Goron rhythm game. There's 8 total rounds of this minigame, where each round consists of the Goron in the center doing some combination of A button presses and B button presses, and you have to mimic what he does. But the hard part is not just memorizing what buttons to press, you also have to memorize the spacing between each button press, so the tempo and rhythm. And there's not even a metronome playing in the background, which makes it even harder, and you can only miss up to 2 of the 8 rounds before failing the minigame, where failing would result in you needing to start over again. But after a few attempts at the minigame, I managed to earn my prize of the mermaid key to gain access to the next dungeon, which I walked over to immediately. But I only scratched the surface of these minigames. I was done playing through the cart shooter one, but little did I know how much pain I would have to endure in the near future playing the baseball and Goron rhythm game some more. This is because certain rings exist in the game that can only be earned through playing these 2 minigames, and at a considerably tougher difficulty compared to the rounds required to complete for beating the base game. But more on those later. For now though, I spent around 13.5 hours playing Zelda for day 3, and I was feeling pretty worn out. I was still pleased with my pace at this point, but those 3 minigames that I had just completed took a toll on me due to how stressful they were at times. I think their difficulty was amplified by how tired I was at this point, being the end of the day and all. So after throwing in the towel for the day, I decided to pick things up in the morning of day 4. Mermaid Cave, the next dungeon I had to tackle, is an interesting dungeon that requires a player to switch between the past and present in order to complete. It does have a pretty annoying room though, where there are 2 switches, and you're required to pull the correct one to make a chest spawn that contains the boss key. But the real kicker is that it doesn't matter if you choose a left or right switch. The chest spawning is not correlated to which switch you pull, so if you keep pulling the left switch, the chest will eventually spawn after not spawning for a while. And if you pull the right switch, the chest will eventually spawn after not spawning for a while. Why would Nintendo choose to make such a horrible design choice? No idea. Players are supposed to learn from their mistakes, not do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. This dungeon also housed my least favorite item in the game, the mermaid suit, which has more versatility than the flippers because it lets Link swim in deep waters, but it controls quite a bit worse than the flippers. To move around with the flippers, you hold the direction you want to go and spam the A button to move fast. But to move around with the mermaid suit, you have to spam the D-pad in the direction you want to move, where the faster you spam it, the faster you move. I'm not sure if me playing Zelda games for days on end for this challenge just made my thumbs weak, but it was super tiring trying to swim with the mermaid suit, where my thumbs cramped up quite a bit. I was so unmotivated to play through any swimming sections, and it honestly baffles me that Nintendo made a choice to map the mermaid suit controls like this in the game. Simply holding down a D-pad direction to move should have sufficed, instead of having to spam the button to move around. Also, another thing that sucked with the mermaid suit is that while you're submerged underwater, you cannot use the item mapped to your B button. I would normally play the game with the sword mapped to my B button, so anytime I had to get in the water, I would have to change my sword to the A button instead. They evidently did this because when you're underwater, the B button is needed to dive deeper or shallower into the water, so I guess in that instance, Nintendo was just doing their best with the limited hardware they had at their disposal. But anyway, moving on from that tangent, I managed to beat the dungeon, and back in Lena Village, I purchased a piece of heart for 500 rupees. I then swam around the outskirts of the island with the lizard people, and came across one in hiding that gave me the upgraded level 2 shield, deemed the Iron Shield. I then swam around the southwest corner of the map for a bit until I came across what I think is the second hardest dungeon in the entire Zelda franchise, Jabu Jabu's Belly, with of course the hardest Zelda dungeon ever being the Great Palace from Zelda 2. I honestly don't think Nintendo is capable of making a dungeon harder than the Jabu Jabu's Belly from Oracle of Ages ever again. This should seem as a good thing, because what makes this dungeon so hard isn't necessarily its complex and mind-bending puzzles. I think it mostly has to do with the limitations of the hardware. There's an item that you have to use in this dungeon called a switch hook that allows you to switch places with objects that you hook onto. It's a pretty cool and novel concept not seen before in Zelda, but I guess due to the screen crunch present in this game, there's a number of objects that you have to trade places with that are literally off-screen, so you have to memorize where they are located to know where to use your switch hook. Also, a central theme of this dungeon is lowering and raising water levels, similar to the water temple from Ocarina of Time. But it's a lot harder to visualize the water changing levels in Oracle of Ages compared to Ocarina of Time, because Oracle of Ages is in 2D and not 3D. The glitter on the turd for things that suck in this dungeon is that during the majority of it, you'll be swimming. And you know what that means? Spamming the D-pad to move around almost constantly with the mermaid suit. For real, it was a massive chore to move around in this place. And what's even worse is I'll have to play through this entire dungeon again later on in this challenge, because to obtain 100% completion, you have to beat each Oracle game twice. So once out of the dungeon, I decided to do some ring collecting. I got the green holy ring from a chest in the Fairy Woods, as well as the whimsical ring from a chest close to the Jabu Jabu Belly's dungeon. You are not actually able to use rings collected until you pay money to get them appraised at Vasu's place, so I made my way over to Vasu's to appraise the roughly 20 or so rings that I collected up until that point. Upon talking to him, I learned that I got the ring for killing 1,000 monsters, which was honestly pretty surprising because I thought for sure I would have to grind for that ring, but I got it from just playing the game normally. After appraising all of my rings, I had 17 total unique rings at that point. So yes, I had a decent amount of duplicate rings that I acquired, which are honestly unfortunately common in this game. All of the rings I had at this point were pretty much garbage, so I didn't really even bother wearing any specific ring and just moved on with my quest. Not much longer, I made my way into the last dungeon of the game, Ancient Tomb. To my pleasant surprise, this dungeon was a lot easier compared to Jabu Jabu's Belly. It was pretty linear, but there was a super annoying swimming section with bottomless pits all around, and rough currents that can send Link towards unintended directions. And if you fall down a pit, you lose some health and have to start the room all over again. Now I entered this room with full health of 12 hearts, and for 5 whole minutes, I watched my health slowly dwindle until I was at 1.5 hearts left. I had particular difficulty with this area right before the screen's transition, where you have to thread the needle twice through a one-tile opening. Finally though, I was able to transition to the next room, so if I fell in a pit, I would restart at this screen's transition. This next room was a lot easier, but that did not stop me from falling in some pits, where I went from 1 heart to half a heart right before making it to safety. If I took any more damage at this point, I would spawn at the beginning of the dungeon again and would have to do the whole swimming section over again. So I needed to heal myself and avoid damage at all costs. And I died. But I hit a switch to unlock a shortcut staircase mere milliseconds before I died, so now I could just waltz up these stairs without having to sit through that annoying swimming section again. Before long, I made it to the dungeon's boss, which was actually pretty challenging with multiple phases, but in the end, I made it out victorious and collected the Lucky Charm. Seriously though, doesn't this thing look exactly like something you'd find on a Lucky Charm cereal box? Just me? Okay. Upon exiting the dungeon, I came across one of the most useful rings in the game, and one that I had in my ring box at almost all times. The blue ring, which doubles Link's defense. This was so helpful because I could play more recklessly without worrying about gaming over as much. From here, I rounded up some Gasha tree rewards spread across Labyrinth that I planted as I played the game, had an intermission where I played with McPoo, and mentally prepared myself for the most challenging and mentally taxing part of Oracle of Ages and Seasons, the endgame grind for 100% completion rewards. If you may recall, earlier on in this video, I mentioned that a very common reward from Gasha trees are rings. And there are many Gasha tree exclusive rings that I will need to obtain based on chance, where the whole process is basically a gacha system where you keep planting seeds until you get all the rings you want, and repeat rings are unfortunately very common. In a casual playthrough of Oracle of Ages and Seasons, you cannot really obtain all Gasha tree exclusive rings normally, so I knew I needed to grind for Gasha rewards. I also knew of a time-consuming ring that I needed to acquire called the 100th ring that is gifted to the player after Vasu appraises at least 100 rings in a singular save file. So I figured I would grind for his 100 ring appraisals ring as well as the Gasha tree exclusive rings at the same time in order to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. If I could go back in time to the challenge, I think I would have saved all this grinding for rings until right at the tail end of my very last playthrough, because I certainly would have acquired random rings just playing the game normally, that I may not have even needed to grind for. But I just decided to grind at this point in time during my first playthrough because quite frankly, I just wanted to get the Gasha grinding over with. Also, I obtained a decent amount of rings from just playing the game normally, so I figured I would just continue to get more rings until I got the 100 rings appraisals ring. There are about a dozen or so soft soil spots to plant Gasha seeds in Oracle of Ages, and certain soft soil spots can only produce certain rings. The rings that can be acquired from Gasha trees in different locations are split into tiers that range from 1 to 5. So the cursed ring is a tier 1 ring for example, while the green ring is a tier 5 ring. And some soft soil spots can only produce tier 1 to tier 2 rings for example, and some are only able to produce tier 3 to tier 5 rings. The soft soil spot I chose to grind rings for was on Crescent Island in the past. It produces tier 3 to tier 5 rings, which was ideal for me, because that range of tiers included most of the rings that I was missing, and it was in a good location where I could kill enemies fast. I would kill the 2 Octrox and Lever, dive in the water, resurface, and the enemies would respawn for me to kill again. Once I reached 30 enemies defeated, I would claim my Gasha tree reward, which was a ring the large majority of the time, and I would plant a new seed and repeat the process. And for around 25 minutes or so, I farmed the rest of my Gasha seeds that I obtained randomly throughout my quest, until I had 10 of them that I appraised at Vasu's place. Most of these ended up being pretty useless, and I even got some duplicates, but probably the most useful ring that I obtained was the Gasha ring, which reduces the number of enemies that you have to kill to make a Gasha tree grow from 30 enemies to 20 enemies, as well as increasing your chances of finding rarer Gasha tree rewards such as rings. So from here on out, wearing this ring was pretty much a given whenever I went Gasha tree farming. But since I was out of Gasha seeds at this point, I had to find another way to obtain some seeds. In the meantime, I did some more spelunking for other goodies. In one of the caves with Gorons, I was able to obtain my favorite ring in the game, and the one that I wore the most often, the Gold Joy Ring, which doubles the amount of items Link collects off the ground, including rupees, hearts, bombs, etc. Doubling hearts picked up made combat so much easier, and doubling the amount of rupees collected made another ring in this game a lot easier to obtain, deemed the Rupee ring, which requires Link to obtain 10,000 rupees to earn. But I'll touch more on that Rupee ring later on. I find it crazy how extremely well hidden this Gold Joy Ring is though. You have to bomb a wall to get to it, but there's absolutely no indication that this wall is bombable, unless you're randomly testing the wall with your sword to listen for that distinct bombable wall noise. I then appraised 3 more rings that have set locations and chests scattered across Labyrinth, and then made my way to the baseball shooting gallery game, this time in Luna Village instead of the Goron residence. I came here with the goal to collect 3 rings, where if you get 350 points or more in the minigame, you obtain a random ring that could be one of the 3 rings that I desired. The 2 more common rings I wanted to obtain here were the Blue Holy Ring and the Red Luck Ring. These 2 rings can be obtained randomly from Gasha trees, but I wanted to obtain them at the shooting gallery because they are pretty much guaranteed rewards there. But the main reason I decided to play this minigame is the elusive level 2 light ring, which has a less than 5% chance of being a reward. And you don't even know what ring the grand prize is until after you appraise the ring at Vasu's. So each time you get at least 350 points, you have to cross your fingers and hope that it's the ring you want. And what's worse is that this minigame is not easy by any means, where it's very easy to lose a bunch of points by accidentally hitting the purple blocks instead of the blue blocks. And if you get a strike, you lose a whopping 50 points. Also, it's not like the level 2 light ring is even that good of a ring. It just allows Link to shoot sword beams if he has up to 3 hearts missing, instead of normally only being able to shoot sword beams if he's at full health. So after a couple of unremarkable rounds, I managed to win my first ring from this minigame with a total of 440 points earned. So then I went over to Vasu's to see what ring I got. I knew for sure it would be one of the lesser rings, and not the level 2 light ring because the chances were so astronomically low, and no freaking way. The very first ring that I got from this minigame, and it was the rarest ring of them all. I thought I would for sure need to grind for at least an hour to acquire that ring, but I got it just like that. And so I returned to the baseball minigame to try to get the 2 remaining rings I wanted. Most of the times I played, I did not get any ring and either got a Gasha seed or 30 rupees, because I did not earn enough points, but the next ring I got ended up being another one I needed, the red luck ring, and then I kept playing some more until I got to an extremely heated match. On the second to last pitch, I got 340 points, which was 10 points away from getting me the ring reward. And so on this very last pitch, I needed at least 10 points, and so as the ball came out, I choked and hit a purple block, which lost me 10 points. And so I had to settle with a measly Gasha seed. Whatever. I guess I needed more Gasha seeds anyway for ring grinding, so I couldn't really complain too much. And after some more poor playing, I was in a pretty bad match, where going into the last swing, I had 220 points, which was extremely far behind the needed score of 350. But during the last round, I hit a ball right down the middle, earned 130 points, and got exactly 350 points, which was just enough to get myself a ring. And it even appraised to the blue holy ring, which was the remaining ring I needed from this minigame. So now I could happily put the shooting gallery game behind me. But little did I know that this Child's Play baseball game had nothing on the monstrosity of a minigame I had to endure next. This is the Goron Dance-Off Grind. I can confidently say that this minigame goes down as one of the most challenging minigames in the entire Zelda franchise, in terms of getting what is required to 100% complete the game, and this is due to one ring that I needed to collect from it, the Bomber's Ring, which lets Link set 2 bombs down at once. There are definitely better rings in the game, but this ring was definitely the most challenging to obtain in the game for me. The only place you can obtain the Bomber's Ring is by getting a perfect score on the Platinum level difficulty in the past. So out of the 8 rounds, you cannot miss time the beat created by the Gorons even once. Being that I needed to play on the toughest difficulty, you already knew that the beats I had to recite were the longest and most complex the devs could whip up. Here are some samples. And I found that the hardest rounds to recite were the ones that had super long pauses mixed in. That's because I was so pumped full of adrenaline it would often end times rushing the beat, which would result in me losing. Also, it's not like each minigame attempt was short either. Each one takes about a minute and a half, where that minute and a half took intense focus. Intense focus that was dwindling due to me playing 2D Zelda games for days at this point. So for each attempt, I would hype myself up and convince myself to give it my all. And giving it my all was the only way I would ever be getting the Bomber's Ring. It was so easy to lose focus and just be in a perpetual state of playing this minigame over and over again. The only real upside to this minigame is that for each difficulty, the Goron has a limited bank of beats that he could repeat, so if you play the minigame long enough, you will start to memorize the rhythms. But it takes a decent amount of playing to get to that level of comfort with this minigame. So after playing for a while, I kept messing up earlier on in my attempts, until I got to what seemed like a golden run, where I had completed 5 rounds perfectly, and there were only 3 more rounds left that I had to play through flawlessly to get the ring. This is how it played out. That third to last round had a chilling pause that I had to replicate. The second to last round was an extremely long beat to recite, but because I played this game so much, I was pretty familiar with it. Now on to the last round. And I did it! My heart was beating so fast during those last 3 rounds, but I was successful and was so glad it was over. So I went over to Vasu to appraise my ring and... A protection ring? I already own that ring. Where's the Bomber's ring? Well, similar to the level 2 light ring from the shooting gallery, the Bomber's ring is not a guaranteed ring upon getting a perfect score at the Goron Dance game. So even after playing flawlessly in such a difficult minigame, I had to go back to the Goron Dance Hall and get a perfect score again, just to have another chance at getting the Bomber's ring again. And miraculously, I got a perfect score on the very next attempt. I was super pumped and crossed my fingers as I got the ring appraised at Vasu's. And... another protection ring. I was officially getting bad luck. You can either get the protection ring or the Bomber's ring by getting a perfect score, where the protection ring is only slightly more likely to be a prize compared to the Bomber's ring. So with my spirits at the lowest point in the challenge thus far, I trudged back to the Goron Dance Hall. And man, did I hit a drought. I was just so discouraged at this point, because even if I did get a perfect score, I would most likely just win the protection ring again, so what's the point? Eventually, I got a perfect score for the 3rd time and got another attempt at the Bomber's ring. So I went to Vasu's again, and... the protection ring again. I couldn't believe how unlucky I was getting. This terrible luck nightmare would soon be over when, after getting a perfect score from this dreadfully hard minigame for the 4th time, I went to Vasu again and... I finally obtained the Bomber's ring. I would not recommend trying to get a perfect score on the Platinum difficulty once, and especially not the 4 times that I had to endure to get this ring. Also, this is coming from a person with a musical background and who posts music videos of making songs with the in-game instruments in Zelda games. The fact that the Goron Dance minigame does not have a metronome playing really threw me off, so I had to tap my foot to make sure I played everything in time. So from here, I turned my sights on a new challenge, completing the Gasha Tree grind for rings. Here's a list of all the Gasha Tree exclusive rings I had left to farm. I still needed the Tier 5 green ring, the Tier 1 cursed ring, the Tier 2 Maples ring, the Tier 3 heart ring level 2, the Tier 2 rocks ring, the Tier 2 wisp ring, and the Tier 3 peace ring. So 7 rings left to grind from Gasha trees. I could also obtain these rings randomly from bumping into Maple, but since Maple drops rings ranging from Tier 1 to Tier 5, I had a better chance getting the rings I wanted by farming specific soil spots with Gasha seeds, where each soft soil spot generates a more specific range of rings compared to Maple. So I slapped on my Gasha ring and went to town on some trees, where I was able to obtain so many Gasha seeds from playing an easier version of the Goron Dancing game. And after hours of Gasha tree farming and many duplicate rings, I got myself down to 2 remaining rings that I plan to eventually get from Gasha trees. The Tier 5 green ring and the level 2 maple ring. During this grind, I even got the 100th ring after appraising 100 rings. Part of me wanted to keep grinding until I got the 2 remaining rings that I desired, but I decided to throw in the towel for now. I was starting to get very fatigued doing the same thing for hours, and I figured that I might be able to get these 2 rings naturally from playing through Oracle of Seasons. So I decided to head over to the Black Tower to beat the final boss, Varen. And so with my blue ring equipped for that sweet defense boost, I entered the fight. And this fight was actually decently challenging. Even with my blue ring equipped, I managed to lose all my hearts once to make the magic potion kick in, and the fight lasted for quite a while with multiple phases. And so after I dealt the finishing blow, I watched a statue get built in Link's honor, the animals turned to normal, and the credits rolled. But our adventure through these pair of Game Boy Color games was far from over though, where after the credits, we unlocked a secret to Hologram password that allows us to link our game to Oracle Seasons when we start a new save file in that game. At this point though, I was mentally done with the Oracle games. After playing that Goron Dance minigame and mindlessly farming for Gasha seeds for hours, I was exhausted to say the least. So I decided to call it quits for the day, with me clocking in at a little over 12 hours of playing Zelda for the day. Less time in the day compared to my 2 previous days. Deep down, I wanted to keep playing for the day, but really could not bring myself to do it. And so to try to keep myself relaxed, I decided to take it easy for the rest of the night and continue my adventure with Oracle of Seasons in the morning. At the beginning of the 5th day of this challenge, I crawled out of bed feeling a lot more energized compared to the night before, and booted up Oracle of Seasons, typed in the secret to Hologram password, and started my adventure in that game, this time starting with 4 hearts instead of the usual 3. So what makes this Link playthrough different from the base game? Well, in my playthrough of Seasons coming up, there are miscellaneous characters that I can talk to that give me 5 character-long passwords I have to tell to specific characters in my original save file of Oracle of Ages. And once I tell the password to specific characters in Oracle of Ages, they give me a reward along with another password that I can type into my Oracle of Seasons save file to give me the same reward in both games. The whole thing is a little confusing and isn't really explained all that well in game, but just know that during my playthrough of Oracle of Seasons, I'll be booting up my original save file of Oracle of Ages occasionally to obtain items needed for 100% completion. So in Oracle of Seasons, after awkwardly dancing with Din for a bit, I went immediately to Vasu and entered in the ring secret password for my playthrough of Oracle of Ages to carry over all the rings that I collected thus far. I then immediately equipped the gold joy ring, which as I mentioned earlier, doubles the amount of items Link picks up off the ground. I mainly used it in my playthrough of Seasons to double my rupee count of rupees that I picked up off the grounds. I needed so many rupees to get the rupee ring that's only obtainable after Link acquires 10,000 rupees in a singular save file. So equipping this gold joy ring at the beginning of the playthrough would allow me to accumulate significantly more rupees compared to if I didn't wear the ring at the start. I then encounter my first of many secrets that are available after you link Oracle of Seasons with Ages. I talked to this lady in Horon Village who gave me a password and suggested I tilt to the fairies of Labrina from Oracle of Ages. So I then booted up my save file of Ages, endured the cacophony that is the Fairy Wood song, and told the password to a blue fairy to get a full heart container. He then gave me another password that I used back in Oracle of Seasons to get the full heart container in that game as well. There's about 20 of these secrets that I'll be acquiring as I 100% these two games, and I won't bring up every single one of them because there's a lot of them, but I'll just talk about the noteworthy ones. Pretty much all of them give a pretty good reward, whether it be a sword level upgrade, upgrade his shield, or a heart container. I then cleared out the first dungeon, which was extremely easy, and the boss actually looked a lot like the first boss from Zelda 1, albeit with more pixels this time around. The dungeons in Oracle of Seasons were all fairly easier and definitely leaps and bounds less complex compared to some of the devilish dungeons from Oracle of Ages. I'm looking at you, Jabu's belly. Oracle of Seasons being combat focused and not puzzle focused definitely added to Oracle of Seasons being easier. I then got 100 rupees from a creepy old man hiding under a tree, as well as another 100 rupees from another creepy old man hiding under a totally separate tree. I made sure to collect as many hidden rupees in chests as possible to make obtaining the rupee ring a lot less daunting as I got towards the end of Oracle of Seasons. I then played a game of Ring Around the Rosie as I followed a cloaked lady to the hidden world of Subrosia, where Subrosia is a subterranean lava world that can only be accessed by entering the swirly portal things. In this other world, I played a rhythm dance minigame to get the boomerang, where this minigame gave me traumatic flashbacks to the torture I went through playing the Goron dance minigame from Ages. Thankfully, this dancing game with the Subrosians was significantly easier, where you just have to memorize 3 inputs at a time, and the tempo was consistent through the whole minigame, so I was able to beat the minigame on my first attempt. I then got the Rod of Seasons, which allows Link to change what season it is after standing on a stump. Depending on what season it is, certain overworld features change, such as winter allowing for bodies of water to be frozen over for you to walk on, or autumn allowing these mushroom things to be picked up to let you progress. So after getting the Rod of Seasons and returning to the overworld, I bumped into Maple and she gave me, good god, that's the ugliest possible combination of pixels that could be programmed into this game. That's the kind of thing you see in nightmares. Anyway, I obtained the Ghastly Doll, which further progressed this game's long optional trading sequence. I then learned another Link game secret that gave me a Seed Satchel upgrade in both games. Back in Oracle of Seasons, I made my way to the second dungeon, followed a very obvious arrow, and made it to a secret room with a bunch of rupees on the ground free to be snatched up. With my gold joy ring equipped, these rupees doubled and came out to be a whopping 367 rupees. Yeah, this ring is the best in the game hands down. So after knocking out this dungeon pretty easily, I manipulated the seasons to net myself a piece of heart, and visited my buddy McPoo's house to find the kid bouncing off the walls like a maniac. I mean, good god, who raised this kid? Oh wait, I raised him. Hey kid, I'll be right back. I'm just gonna go get some milk at the local Horon Village mini-mart that definitely exists. Don't worry though, I won't be long. So after narrowly escaping that situation, I did some walking through the forest when I stumbled across Princess Zelda who I saved from some moblins, and then dug up almost every single diggable spot on the beach in Subrosia to get a star-shaped ore so that I could trade it for a ribbon so that a girl would go on a date with me. Ah, the things that Link does for love. So after being a certified Rizzler and making the Subrosian girl fall for Link, she showed him the hiding spot of a fairy that upgraded Link's Rod of Seasons, allowing him to enter the third dungeon of the game, Poison Moth's Lair. This dungeon was a little tricky because you had to push around these trampoline things to bring you to higher floors, so you had to be cognizant of your surroundings. There was this one room that made me incredibly nauseous where you get the Rock's Feather in a chest. I mean, just look at this absolute mess of colors. This is the kind of thing that maniacs play on an old CRT TV to hypnotize people into a vegetative state. So after I was able to make it through that dungeon, I encountered a golden Octorok, which is the first of 4 gold-colored enemies that I will have to defeat in order to obtain the red ring, which doubles Link's attack power. I used a guide to find these 4 guys, so it was pretty easy to find them, but they are actually pretty hard to find if you're going into the game blind. Each of the 4 only appear on one map screen of the overworld, but the real kicker is that each of them only appears in a specific season, so to find them, the game expects you to pretty much visit every single map tile on the overworld during each of the 4 seasons. Definitely a lot more convoluted compared to the blue ring from Oracle of Ages that I was able to just find in a chest. The golden beasts have a lot more health compared to normal enemies, but they honestly aren't anything crazy difficult to defeat. So after taking down the golden Octorok, I learned a secret from a lady that I'd told to another lady in Oracle of Ages. After telling the secret to the lady in Oracle of Ages, she asked me to find her dog somewhere in the village, which I did pretty easily as the guy was just running around out in the open. And so after returning her dog, I got the snowshoe ring, which prevents you from sliding on ice. This ring should be pretty useful, but there honestly was not that much ice in Oracle of Seasons or Ages, so I never really actually used this ring at all. Also, apparently there's a glitch in this dog catching minigame, where once you start the minigame, there's a chance that the dog never spawns and can never be returned to its owner. Super depressing, I know. I luckily did not trigger this glitch, but I made sure to save my game before starting this minigame just in case. So from here, I bartered for some flippers from a cave dweller, and learned another link game password secret to unlock the bomb shoes in both Oracle of Seasons and Ages. They work similar to how they work in other Zelda games, where they run along the ground until they explode upon hitting something. But in the Oracle games, they have an added feature of acting as a heat-seeking missile that can hone in on enemies automatically, regardless of what direction you're facing when you place one. It's a neat feature, but I never really used them all that much because I was so used to sword combat at this point anyway. Also, the game only gives you 10 of them to start with, and the only way to get more is to purchase them for quite a hefty price at Syrup's shop. In Oracle of Seasons, I then made my way to a hidden dungeon that's only accessible in a linked playthrough, the Hero's Cave. This dungeon is not required to beat the game, but it had some collectibles in it required for 100%. In order to beat the dungeon, I still needed items and equipment that I had yet to acquire from the mainline dungeons, but I decided to tackle part of it now because of a secret password that you learn from Azora. Once telling the secret password to King Zora of Oracle of Ages, I was rewarded with a level 3 Master Sword, which is the strongest sword in the game. After carrying that reward over to Oracle of Seasons, I only got the level 2 Noble Sword because I had not completed the quest to get the other sword upgrade in that game yet. I wanted to get the sword upgrade sooner rather than later, because with an upgraded sword, combat sections could be made much easier, and I could kill enemies much faster, increasing my efficiency. I then broke into a Moblin's home and leveled it with bombs in order to get a heart piece. Also, then I visited the Moblin in his secondary home, where you can see him woefully stitching together a bomb. And you can actually destroy the guy's home yet again, which I find pretty absurd that you can actually do. I then knocked out the 4th dungeon, which wasn't really anything special, so I won't really dwell on it. I then decided to go for one of the most random rings in the game that probably should not even exist, the Sign Ring, which you obtain by destroying at least 100 signs and then talking to the sign-living Subrosian and Subrosia. There's probably many different places to grind for this ring, but I found this random spot in the overworld that I just kept visiting over and over again until I destroyed the sign 100 times. So once I talked to the Subrosian after destroying 100 signs, he decided to troll punish me by pretending to reset my game, which I find absolutely hilarious. He then gave me the sign ring to remind me of my mistake. Like many other novelty rings in these two games, the sign ring does absolutely nothing when worn. I then planted a Gasha seed on a soft soil spot, beat the next dungeon Unicorn's Cave, and returned to the Gasha plant to find it fully grown. The soft soil spot that I planted my seed generates tier 2 to tier 4 rings, so my plan was to grind here until I got the maple ring and the heart piece. I knew I could not get the green ring here because that ring is tier 5. In order to grind here, I decided to check the Gasha reward and keep reloading my save until I got what I wanted, because I didn't want to waste a crap ton of my Gasha seeds and a crap ton of time killing enemies waiting for the tree to grow. But no matter how much I grinded, I seemed to keep getting tier 1 rings, which made me confused because I was farming on a tier 2 to tier 4 ring spot. After repeatedly failing, I decided to call the grind quits for now because something didn't seem right, and just continued on with my adventure. But looking at it after the fact, I think the first Gasha seed you plant in a playthrough always gives a tier 1 ring prize, regardless of where you plant it. And since that was my first Gasha seed I planted in my save file, I kept getting tier 1 rings every single time I reloaded my save. I'm not 100% sure that's true, but that's what I've gathered from my experience. But it really is a shame that I didn't realize this mechanic sooner because I wasted a bunch of time grinding for rewards that I had no chance of winning at all. During my grind, I did get the heart piece from Maple though, which was good at least. From here, I talked to a Goron to learn a secret that I told to another Goron in my save file of Oracle of Ages in order to unlock a special minigame. In this minigame, you have to win the Shooting Gallery baseball game, where doing so nets you the Bigoron Sword, which deals massive damage but takes up 2 item slots and is incredibly slow to swing. But there's a catch to this minigame. Instead of using your normal sword to complete it, you have to use this big ass clunky behemoth of a sword to hit these tiny baseballs. When I played this game with my regular sword, I would just spam my sword to ensure that I at least hit the ball, and pray that I hit the correct blocks to gain points. But with this Bigoron sword, you actually have to play the game as intended, and perfectly time a singular swing to not strike out and lose points, and hit enough blue blocks to win the Bigoron sword prize. During my first attempt, I totally flubbed it and only got 120 points instead of the needed 300. But during my second attempt, I totally surprised myself and got 330 points. I honestly think I got pretty lucky with that second attempt, because there were times where I sort of just swung haphazardly and miraculously got a positive increase in points. So with my new sword in hand, that I admittedly never used once during combat in my entire playthrough, the Goron taught me a password to bring the sword into my save file of Oracle of Seasons as well. From here, I progressed through the main story of Oracle of Seasons some more and stumbled across a digging spot in Subrosia that contained a magical ring. The magical ring from the digging spot is totally random, and it wouldn't be until later that I actually appraised the thing to see what ring it was. But just see for yourself what ring I got from that digging spot. I got the maple ring, one of the 2 remaining rings that I plan on grinding Gasha seeds for. I was super pumped upon appraising this thing. It was honestly extremely unexpected. While I was playing the game, I was just thinking about not digging that digging spot because it seemed unimportant. But I decided to go slightly out of my way to unearth it, thinking that it couldn't hurt. And once I saw that maple ring, I was sure glad I took the extra time to dig up that spot. From here, I completed the game's long trading sequence after playing a phonograph for a Deku Scrub to net me the level 3 Master Sword. I then made my way to Dungeon 6 Ancient Ruins, which was a super cool dungeon. The whole thing makes you feel like you're in an Indiana Jones movie, where there's this one section where once you try to pick up a large rupee, you have to quickly make it through an obstacle course before walls close in on you. And yes, I'm sad to admit that the walls closed in on me during my first attempt, which actually kills you instantly even if you have full health, which is honestly pretty wild. Also, right before the dungeon, I lost my shield to a like, which made me super nervous during the dungeon because there was a bunch of these spiky boys that I couldn't kill. Oftentimes killing enemies are required in the game to unlock areas, so I really didn't want to have to exit the dungeon and go all the way back to Horon Village just to buy a shield in order to kill these guys. But luckily, I didn't need to worry about that, as killing these spiky enemies wasn't required. I just hopped around them awkwardly trying not to get hit by them. There was also a room that netted me 356 rupees with my gold joy ring equipped, that helped me in my quest to get the fabled rupee ring. So after beating the dungeon, I felt guilty about my milk excuse and visited McPoo to find him fully grown, and he looks just like... yeah, this kid's definitely not mine. But just like that, the Bibbin child quest was completed with him fully grown. I didn't get any reward from it, but I guess that's justified because it's not like I put that much effort into the whole thing. Also at this point in the game, I was able to take out the last of the 4 golden beasts, which netted me the red ring, doubling my attack power, which I admittedly never used. I preferred the blue ring because my attack power was already increased for most of the game by the level 2 noble sword and later the level 3 master sword. With the Master Sword equipped, I was already one-shotting most enemies anyway, so wearing the red ring would just be overkill at that point. From here, I learned the final link game secret, which netted me the level 3 mirror shield in both Oracle of Seasons and Ages. I then made my way over to the 7th dungeon of Explorer's Crypt, which I cleared with relative ease. The boss, Gleeok, probably would have been pretty challenging if it wasn't for my mini heart containers, level 3 Master Sword, and blue defense boost ring equipped. So once killing the boss, I obtained... testicles? Like seriously, I'm not sure what this is supposed to be. Also, it doesn't help that they call it the Seed of Life. Like, come on Nintendo, how did you get away with this? I then knocked out Dungeon 8, Sword and Shield Maze Dungeon, which is definitely the hardest dungeon in the game, and it took me quite a while to complete due to how massive it was. With that dungeon completed, I finally had all the dungeon items needed to take on Hero's Cave, the extra side dungeon that I mentioned earlier. Hero's Cave had some tricky elements, but it was pretty linear, so it wasn't too hard to know where I needed to go. There is this insanely cryptic puzzle at the end of the dungeon though, where an old man tells you to open 8 chests in a specific order, where he tells you that the secret order lies in where the chests are placed. I had to look up the solution, but apparently each chest represents one of the main 8 dungeons in the game in the location they appear in the overworld map, and you're supposed to open the chests in the order of the dungeon numbers. Not only is it difficult to make this connection, but it's crazy that the game expects you to remember where on the overworld map each dungeon was located. Like, this is the map we're going off of here. It's not exactly detailed enough to see where each dungeon is located. So after opening the chest in the correct order, that opened a path to the prize of the dungeon, a magical ring that appraises to the level 3 power ring, which is a pretty lame reward in my opinion. It increases your attack by 3 points, but also decreases your defense by 3 points, causing you to take insane amounts of damage when hit. So honestly, this ring seemed more like a hindrance when worn instead of a power-up. Now from here, I could take on the final boss and beat Oracle of Seasons, but there were 2 Gasha tree rewards that I wanted to acquire. The Heart Piece reward and the Green Ring. I decided to grind for these 2 rewards at a soft soil patch in Tarm Ruins, because the tiers of rewards generated from this patch would make obtaining these 2 items possible. And there were quite a few enemies around that I could kill to make the tree grow fast. And so I equipped my Gasha ring and planted a seed. I had plenty of Gasha seeds at this point, but in order to prevent myself from needing to kill hundreds of enemies to let trees grow, I decided to allow for the tree to fully grow, saved my game, and then kept reloading my save until I got the rewards that I wanted. In order to manipulate the RNG to give me different rewards at each attempt, I would swing my sword around and kill enemies, and I actually was able to get the heart piece rather quickly, bringing myself to 16 total hearts, the most you can acquire in the game. So now I had one more ring to grind for, the green ring. And boy did this ring give me some issues. It's sort of fitting that this ring was the last one left that I needed to acquire from Gasha trees. It's a super powerful ring, being a blend between the red ring and blue ring, where once worn, it increases your attack power slightly and defense slightly. But the attack power, for example, won't increase as much compared to if you wore the red ring. So the green ring is basically for people who are on the fence of whether or not they want to wear their blue ring or the red ring. And so after about 30 minutes or so after I got the heart piece reward, I got a ring from the tree, went to Vasu to see what ring it was, and I found that it was the green ring. I was super pumped at this point, because the grind for rings exclusive to Gasha seeds was over, but I had one more ring that I wanted to grind for before I went and beat the game, the Rupee ring. Out of the 64 rings that exist in the game, this one is definitely in the top 5 of annoying rings to collect. You get it from Vasu after collecting a whopping 10,000 rupees in a singular save file. So yes, even when you play in a Link game, the rupees you accumulate between the two different save files aren't added together to count towards your total. What's absurd about this ring is if you open every single rupee chest in the game and collected all hidden rupees just lying around, you wouldn't even come close to obtaining 10,000 rupees. So it's a ring that you're guaranteed to need to grind for. Before taking on this challenge, I tried researching sources of rupees that could earn me 10,000 quickly, but there was no surefire tactic for the best way to get so many rupees fast. Part of me thought of playing minigames over and over to get rupees, but that seemed annoying because pretty much all minigames in the Oracle games don't really net the player that many rupees. For a lot of the minigames, there is a 100 rupee grand prize, but even that grand prize isn't very consistent. So after doing some more research, I settled on my tactic for getting 10,000 rupees. Digging holes. Lots and lots of holes. It would take a long time, but with my gold joy ring equipped, the amount of rupees that I needed to collect off the ground would get doubled. Most of the rupees that I would dig up would be green rupees now worth 2 rupees, and red rupees now worth 10 rupees. But there's actually a small chance that you can dig up a large blue rupee worth 200 rupees with a gold joy ring equipped. And those large blue rupees were the ones I was banking on to increase my rupee count quickly. During my first adventure in Oracle Seasons up until this point, I made sure to roughly keep track of how many rupees I collected along the way to see how far I had to go. Where at this point, I had around 6,500 rupees left to go until I could get the rupee ring. I was tempted to stop playing for the day because I already clocked in about 13 hours for that day, but I had a bit more energy left in me, so I decided to press on. Also, the digging I was about to do was extremely mindless, so I planned on just listening to YouTube videos off on the side while I grinded for rupees. So I took out my shovel, found a space in the overworld with a lot of diggable spots, put on some Mr. Ballin', and started digging some holes.
You got to go and dig those holes. With broken hands and withered souls, emancipated from all you know. You got to go and dig those holes.
And so after almost 2 hours of mindless digging, I finally had enough rupees to get the rupee ring. From here, I entered Onyx's castle to take on the final boss. I was absolutely stacked with gear going into this fight, so I defeated Onyx and this dragon creature with ease. I was then teleported to the true final boss of the Oracle games, starting with Twinrova, where this fight is only available if you're playing a Link game. And so I defeated Twinrova, took out Ganon, and watched Link radiate with love after being kissed by Princess Zelda. The credits began to roll, the citizens of Holodrum rejoiced, and Oracle of Seasons was put in the books. Or so you may think. My journey to 100% these two Game Boy Color games was far from over in reality. After beating the game, I was shown a password deemed the Hero Secret. This secret is essentially a New Game Plus, where if you start a new save file in the game you just finished, you are gifted a victory ring which does nothing, can carry over all rings previously obtained, and are able to experience the game you just finished first in the order of linking the games instead of second. So after beating Oracle of Ages and then linking it with a playthrough of Oracle of Seasons, I then had to play Oracle of Seasons again, and then link it with a playthrough of Oracle of Ages and play Oracle of Ages again. There is some silver lining to this though. I did not have to worry about collecting rings I already had, so the Rupee ring grind isn't required again, but I'll need to pick up every single heart piece again, get all equipment upgrades again, and beat every single dungeon that I already completed again. The order of which I will have to replay these games are Oracle of Seasons again, followed by Oracle of Ages. I'll just kind of glance over these 2 additional playthroughs in this video for your sake, because they were 99% the same experience I had the first time around. But for now, I was pooped. I spent the longest amount of time playing Zelda games on this day compared to any other standalone day thus far, where I was playing these Oracle games for almost 15.5 hours for the day, so I decided to pick up replaying Oracle of Seasons and Ages in the morning. Calling my replays of Oracle of Seasons and Ages boring would be an understatement. I spent the entirety of day 6 of the challenge playing through these games again, where I spent a little under 14.5 hours on them that day, but didn't even fully complete them that day. I actually 100% completed them a little under 3 hours into day 7, and quite honestly, that span of time between days 6 and 7 was the most boring part of the challenge for me by far. It was super tedious doing the same stuff over again, where pretty much the only new stuff that happened were those 5 character-long secrets that you had to switch between the 2 games in order to complete. So all 10 of these were unique compared to the secrets that I already completed, except the rewards for most of them were pretty much identical. The rewards that were not identical were the additional rings that I needed. After getting the victory ring from starting a playthrough with the hero's secret, I was only missing 3 rings until I had all 64 of them. 2 of these 3 missing rings were rewards from the 10 Link game secrets, where we had the level 1 heart ring that slowly lets Link regain hearts, and the swimmer's ring which lets you swim faster. The last missing ring, and the last ring that I attained in my playthroughs, was a level 3 armor ring, which I found at the end of the Hero's Cave in Oracle of Ages. The Hero's Cave in Oracle of Seasons was difficult, but nothing compared to how annoying the Oracle of Ages one was. In this dungeon, the puzzle difficulty was taken to the extreme, with a lot of the solutions revolving around game mechanics that were never explained to the player. For example, in one room, you're supposed to use the Cane of Samaria through a solid block to hit a hidden switch, because that makes sense. And then in another room, you're tasked to walk around, turning all blue squares red without stepping where you already stood. I thought this was literally impossible when I came to realize that in order to clear this room, you're required to use the Cane of Samaria to cover up a blue block to make it appear red, to trick the game into thinking that all the blocks are red without any blues. Like, you can't even make up how absurd that solution is. Also, what tops the BS Express is that towards the end of the dungeon, you're expected to do these insanely precise reach-around jumps with the Pegasus Boots and Rock's Feather, where you have to do 4 of them in a row, and if you fail one of them, you get to start over. I'm honestly pretty happy that I left this dungeon as pretty much the last thing I did to 100% these 2 games, because if I encountered this dungeon earlier on, I actually might have rage quit. But at the end of the dungeon, I got the last ring, the level 3 armor ring, which is honestly a pretty worthless ring, and it's not really even worth talking about. But look at this menu of rings, with all 64 filled out without any empty slots. What a sight to behold. Some were easy to get, some were incredibly challenging, but we got all of them in the end. And so after defeating Onyx and Oracle of Seasons again, Varian and Oracle Ages again, I took out Ganon for the second time and marked these games as 100% completed. Wow, these 2 games were a journey alright. The time I spent playing Oracle of Seasons and Ages was almost twice as much as I spent playing the first 4 2D Zelda games from the previous video, where my total time spent playing the Oracle games totaled approximately 53.5 hours. That's absolutely insane. While I was playing them, at times, it felt like an endless slog where it almost seemed like I would never complete them. I especially felt this during my 3rd and 4th playthroughs, where I had to do pretty much the exact same stuff over again. Once I was able to put these 2 Oracle games behind me in this challenge, I was actually pretty hyped to take on the next game. I still had a long road to go until I 100% completed all 10 2D Zelda games, but with 6 games down and 4 left to go, I felt like I had the end in sight. These next 4 games wouldn't be easy though, as the amount of hours required to complete each game ramps up from here, as Nintendo made 100%ing a lot of the modern Zelda games much longer compared to what we've seen previously in the challenge. The next game I played through begins the modern era of 2D Zelda games, which I'll cover in part 3, where we begin with an absolute gem of a Zelda game and one that's oftentimes quoted as one of the best 2D Zelda games of all time, The Legend of Zelda the Minish Cap, where part 3, the finale, contains some of the most nail-biting and absurd 100% completion criteria in this entire challenge. Depending on when you're watching this, part 3 may already be out, but if you're early, stay tuned for the finale soon to come.